It is now 6:30 p.m., and I'd like to call to order the October 18th, 2021 study session of the Board of Trustees of the Aldine Independent School District. Let the minutes reflect that all board members are present, and please be reminded that our meeting is being viewed online tonight. We will begin the meeting with the report of the administrative staff. Dr. Goffney.
Mr. President, Board of Trustees, my report will begin on page 17. It's an opportunity for a debrief on a TASB conference. Our team was fortunate to attend. This is an annual opportunity, and so after each conference or opportunity for learning, we always have an opportunity to share. So would anyone like to share about something they learned or something they experienced at the TASB conference?
Board, any comment about the TASB conference?
There was a lot of good classes there, and many of the classes were on the new laws that were approved by the Texas Congress, and so a lot of review on that and telling what the school board's duties are and what we have to do. So I got quite a bit of that out of the classes.
Mr. President, I want to really compliment our FACE department because they did an excellent presentation. People were just really raving about it, the information they offered, the amount of work that they have done in a matter of a year. A lot of compliments, so my hat's off to them.
I attended the same session and got the same reviews for them. Well done.
And I also would like to add, I'm a part of the leadership TASB, and I have the pleasure of being a member with 36 other board members. And it was just exciting to hear all of the good things that's going on in other districts. And I am just looking forward to sharing what we're doing here in Aldine.
And I served as a delegate, so that was really interesting. I can't remember all we did, but it was really very interesting. Of course, Rose was there as well. And so it was just very, very enlightening to see the participation that comes from being together. And of course, the FACE was an excellent job. And the other one that I really enjoyed was when Dr. Goffney, with all the superintendents that were there, and the big plus on that one is that they had books for all of them. And we just dashed at the end of the session for the books, and always trusting that you get the one you're supposed to get, right? And so I got the one that Dare to Lead. So I'm looking forward. I have started reading it, and but it's really, really cool, all the different things, the opportunities that we have when we attend that. The only thing is that sure did get our exercise over there. But other than that, it was really, really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
And Mr. President, the other items on my agenda are board committee reports, and I will definitely be giving it over to you for the announcement of Board of Trustees training hours that are on page 18, as well as a distribution of framework for school board development, and that's on page 20.
Well, all school board members know that we must complete training as required by the State Board of Education, and we'll be reading all of that tomorrow. And just like to say that all board members have completed the update, and most of us have exceeded all of the hours required by law.
Mr. President, Board of Trustees, that concludes my agenda items tonight.
Next on my list is Dr. Todd Davis.
Good evening, President Shanklin, board members. My agenda begins on page 35. All three items on my agenda are under consent. The first item is a request for the approval of enrollment agreement between the Texas School for the Blind and Visually Impaired and Aldine ISD. This agreement this partnership allows for the opportunity for our visually impaired students to attend the Texas School for the blind and visually impaired when the ART committee determines that more intensive or specialized services are needed for the student. The second is an approval of an MOU between Lone Star College for college preparatory courses, English and math courses. These are courses that are available at all of our high schools. They're typically for our seniors who have not yet met college entrance requirements or college readiness standards on their STAR exam.
Just a second, Dr. Davis.
Yes.
I'd like to inform the IT department that we're getting messages that we're not being streamed, we're not being able to get viewed. So if you just look into that, you can continue.
Okay, thank you. I guess I should pause there. Are there any questions regarding those first two agreements? I was just rolling along. Okay. And then the third is approval for the an agreement or extension agreement with Texas AgriLife to be established for this school year. This designates that our 4-H activities are extracurricular activities and then are under the guidance of the UIL standards for no pass, no play. So that concludes all the items on my consent agenda. If there are no further questions or any questions.
I do have
Mr.
a
President, I have a question.
Okay.
I saw the number of days that were listed as possible excused absences for students. Now, is that to mean that each student could miss up to that, or some students will participate in some of those, but not all of them?
Yes, that's a good
quite a
question.
few days.
That is quite a few days. And I asked the very same question. No, it is like, it's asking for the highest number possible, but most students, from the information I'm receiving, don't come near that number of days.
Okay,
No.
because I think it's 12, if I'm not mistaken, but
I
it was,
believe it was 12 days.
Okay.
Right, yes,
all right, well, that's good to know. I
Yes.
was just a little concerned about that.
right.
Mr. Mead?
we really don't have an awful lot of 4-H students, do we, Todd? Mostly FFA.
You know, I don't know the exact number, but they are under the FFA and participating in the 4-H activities specifically, I would have to get that information and come back.
Okay.
Find it. 35.
If there are no further questions, that concludes my agenda.
Yeah, Dr. Davis,
I'm sorry.
in discussing this with Dr. Booker, we found, I think what we see is an error, but we're trying to remember on the dates and trying to remember exactly where that is. Basically, I think it was reversed, like October 24th through October 17th. It's the way that it reads, and it should be reading, I'm thinking it should be reading October 17th through the 24th.
Is that page 58?
Yeah,
Trying to make sure that we know the dates.
yes, on page 58.
Okay, I will definitely note that and make any corrections necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out.
If you're, any other questions to Dr. Davis? We'll move on to Katie Rhodey.
Good evening, President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, members of the board. My agenda begins on page 61, and all three agenda items are for information only. The first one on page, starting on page 61, is the proposed final exam and early release schedule for December of 2021. We typically do early release for our high school students. And this is the last 3 days before our holiday break. It is Wednesday, December 15th to Friday, December 17th. The change this year is we are adding in middle schools to the early release, receiving feedback from our middle schools that they also take final exams. And this year is the first year in many years that I can recall that the Friday before Christmas or the holiday break is not a work day. It is a school instructional day. And as a result of that, we are including middle school in the early release and final exam schedule. The schedule is posted, and we have met with, I've met with student services, and there are more than surpassed the number of instructional minutes for those levels, and we have factored it in already. Are there any questions regarding that?
Doesn't appear to be.
Okay. On page 67 is my next agenda item, and this is the graduation schedule for 2022. It will be held in Emil Campbell Center, and as you can see, it will be spread out over 3 days, Thursday, May 26th through Saturday, May 28th. We have 9 graduation ceremonies over the course of those 3 days. We have been getting questions and requests from counselors as well as parents and others that wanted to have those dates and have them ready and available. Are there any questions about that?
It's just nice to see them on a regular schedule. Yeah, maybe we're getting past COVID after all.
Yes, sir. And the last thing on my agenda starts on page 69. And this is the monthly discipline report. This includes all behavior events and information from August and September of this past year. Are there any questions regarding that?
Yes, Dr. Brody, I am concerned about the high numbers, given that, you know, the efforts that you have and Dr. Davis have implemented. The numbers appear still to be high for a number of those categories. SAC, removal from school, 780 students between August and September. The SAC, same period of time, 1,550. Am I reading those correctly?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, is there something else? I know that we are aware of, things going on in our society, increased anger, increased various things that are happening. And the effect, of course, on the public is evident. We've seen that in the media. And it appears that it's translating and impacting our students, and the students see that kind of behavior. I don't know. Am I just supposing, or are there various other things occurring, and our interventions regarding the social emotional learning activities and programming and plan are not supporting the teachers as well as the students? Can you go through those elements and maybe
Yes.
others just in a little bit more detail to help us understand what might be going on that we can help support the teachers and the students with?
Yes, absolutely. And please note the document here compares our numbers from last year. And if you recall, last year, we had a very small amount of students on campus. And so based on that, and as well as anecdotally what we are hearing from campuses, I have asked for more data. So for the last year that we had real data was 2018-19, where we could compare. And based on that, the number of behavior events had actually decreased by 3,455 in the exact same time period. But what we did notice is that our fights and scuffles went up slightly. It went up by about 60 in the same time period, as well as the number of our drug events stayed consistent from that year. And so as we dug a little deeper down, we started to look at what grade levels those were happening at, what campuses, and we have already determined, for example, right now our 8th and 9th graders are the highest number of behavior events. And so that we can prioritize and try to support those campuses with the resources that we have. So in response, we actually have less behavior events, much less than we have had in previous years. But what we are seeing is an uptick in those. And I will say that social media, use of cell phones and others, we've had conversations with principals about that and how we can better support with information, curriculum, and other ways. But I can tell you that our social emotional department is supporting teachers and leaders with not only armed with this data, but also with strategies and resources and curriculum that they are using every single day. So I hope that answered your question.
Well, it does to some extent. The other question that I have, an extension of that, is that the previous desegregation concerns that the board had expressed
Yes.
were of particular demographic groups. Do we still find that that is true in these incidents?
Yes, and thank you. That was another thing that our team looked at. And in digging down deep, there were a couple of things that surfaced from this data. So when we looked at, for example, our males and females, and we're able to separate out even there was still an over representation of African American, both males and females, with behavior consequences than our Hispanic. It was about 20% difference. And when we looked deeper, those specifically were disruption of class and scuffling. And then digging even deeper, the most disparity happened in our 5th and 6th grade. So I spoke earlier that our 8th and 9th grade had the highest number of incidents, but what we noticed is 5th and 6th grade had the greatest rate of disparity in consequences that were assigned based on certain ethnic groups. And so those are all things, again, as we look at this data and we get with the teams and we start saying, now what can we do to help our 5th and 6th grade teachers, as well as the leaders, identify what some of those triggers are and how can we support them. So that is all part of our discipline dashboard that our leaders have access to. It's updated daily, and they are able to disaggregate that not only by ethnic group and gender, but also by special ed status, which is another thing that we're monitoring very closely.
So would you add a little bit more to the support? Obviously, it's the teachers, their disagreements and their various ways to approach the situation to de-escalate rather than escalate.
Right.
So share again with us the professional development strategies, opportunities, structural programs, and are those required pieces for those two categories, those age level staff,
Right.
to participate? Are these voluntary, or just share a little bit more about that?
Okay, so the support is a multi-pronged approach. So depending on the campus, the first thing is there a MTSS team that is there? Because the MTSS team is the one that should be looking at the data by the campus. Multi-tiered systems of support. And that is, we have an academic side as well as a behavior side. And so our MTSS teams have been trained, and this includes our campus behavior coordinators, counselor, and other designated staff on the campus on things such as what our discipline flow chart is, what our common expectations that should be campus-wide and in the classroom, as well as different types of recognition and reward systems that may be in place. So all of those are happening at the MTSS level. Then beyond that, we do have professional development that is offered. Some of it is voluntary, and most of it right now is voluntary, but much of it is happening at the district level. And it is around our 3 signature practices. And so those include how we are welcoming students into the classroom, as well as how are we doing an exit for them so that they feel good after leaving. We also have our restorative practices, and then we have curriculum at every single level. And there is training that all of our teachers received back in August. It was mandatory on that curriculum, as well as some best practices for supporting in the classroom. So we will have future mandatory sessions, second semester, surrounding SEL and our behavior practices.
Thank you, Dr. Rohde. Just let us know and let the board know what we can do to help support
Yes,
those
ma'am.
students and those teachers and staff.
Thank you.
Dr. Rohde, I heard you say that social media is playing a part. in the disruption. Did we have the uptick? Is it from the challenges or anything? Did we have problems with that?
With what? I'm sorry.
Like the TikTok challenges? Did we have any problems with that?
So we did have to investigate several TikTok challenges. And as I'm sure you are aware, some were confirmed and had happened on campus, and others were spread and did not involve an Aldine ISD campus. So, but with each one, we have to go in, we have to investigate, and then we have to find out how can we protect our students and ensure that, they're not using social media in such a way as to cause bullying, intimidation, or violence.
What grade level are we seeing that mostly with?
It is probably, I could say, in the middle schools. And we did see part of that increase in the fights and scuffles and was in the middle school level. And, primarily, as I said, the 8th grade. And remember, I say this again, the last time many of them were on our campuses, they were 6th graders. They were the babies of the campus. We have heard now they're the big kids on the block. Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions, board? Dr. Hardy?
That concludes my part. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Charlotte Davis.
Good evening, Mr. President, Board of Trustees, Dr. Goffney. My agenda begins on page 71 with an agreement with memorandum of agreement with City of Houston for the Juvenile Case Manager Program. The City of Houston invited Aldine to partner with them to provide the juvenile case manager program at one of our high schools with the potential to expand in the future. And the program is based on attendance rates and number of students who have chronic absenteeism and are at risk of dropping out of high school. The program will provide a full-time case manager who will be assigned to the school and focus on truancy and factors that contribute to students' truancy and provide appropriate referrals and services to the youth and their families in an effort to improve attendance and to return students to school. There is no financial obligation to the district. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Davis.
Thank you. That concludes my agenda.
Thank you. Dr. Javier?
Yes, good evening, President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, Board of Trustees. The Human Resources agenda starts on page 80 of Board Book. The first item is the annual Human Capital Report. And so if anyone has questions, I can answer those at this time.
Continue.
Okay. And then the others are just my standard monthly reports. I can also answer questions about any of those.
Any questions to Dr. Javier? Could you fill us again on when you argue?
I'm sorry.
Okay, no, it's not you. Is it? We talked about that when you're going to do your doctorate.
Yes. Oh,
Mr. Okay, sorry. I get confused sometimes. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. You were finished?
yes, sir.
Okay, Dr. Tamika Alford-Stevens.
Good evening, President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, and members of the board. My agenda begins on page 130. And it begins with the consent agenda items, the ratification of the check registers. And then beginning on page 133 are a series of bids. Are there any questions regarding any of the bid items this month?
Board? I don't get a signal.
Yeah, I
Can you-
have a question.
Mr. Reed?
May not have been on these bids, but there was for some engineering. We were improving some engineers for doing some work. How did we select the engineers?
So usually engineers are an RFQ. There's a response for qualifications. So based on their certification and their expertise and experiences, that is traditionally how an engineer or architect is selected for a body of work. So it depends on the type of work, Mr. Reed, that we need support with.
We just got a couple that answer the RFQ.
Yes, sir. Are you speaking specifically to the MOC power generators project?
The two different places.
Mhm.
Same engineer, it looked like.
I'm sorry.
I think it's the same engineering company for both locations.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, sir. If there are no additional questions, I'll proceed. President Shanklin?
Proceed, please.
Okay. The next item for consent is the approval of contracts and purchases over 50K. The line item 4, the budget amendment for this month, and then the monthly tax office refunds. Are there any questions regarding either of those items?
I do have a question.
Dr. Garcia?
Dr. Alfred Stevens, beginning on page 157,
Yes, ma'am.
is that the category we're talking about?
If you're asking about the over 50K,
Yes, is that the
that
right
begins on
category?
page 157. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm just curious if there is a plan or design. I noticed as I was going through this that a good number of these, beginning with Great Minds Amplify, Carnegie Learning, McGraw-Hill, on the next page, Blue Willow Bookstop, American Reading Company, Black History, Frog Street, Benchmark Education, the next page, Vast Higher Learning,
Mhm.
Textbook Warehouse, the Houghton Mifflin Studies Weekly. The amount of 200,000 is a common amount for all of those. So
Yes.
is there a design or a plan or something underlying that specific amount that is the same for each of those?
Sure. So I'm going to let Dr. Davis respond to that question, Dr. Garcia.
So there are oftentimes throughout the school year where we need to purchase resources in classes where we need to replace materials or we need to compensate for increased enrollment. And as we're going through the process, if we do not have already an established board approval, then it becomes a barrier that we can't get the supplies for the students in time. So this request is giving us the opportunity to make those purchases, to put resources in our students' hands as quickly as possible. The amount of $200,000 is after going back and looking at the research of during school year purchases that we have never exceeded $200,000. They're typically between $50,000 and $200,000. So we felt like that $200,000 number was a safe and appropriate, conservative enough number to say that this approval would give us that allowance to make those purchases when that time does come. Now, does this mean that next month we're going to be making purchases of $200,000 for every single thing on this item, on this list? No, not at all. It's very likely that we won't make any purchases that cover all of these asks this year. This is just really asking for your approval so that we can get materials in students' hands as quickly as possible throughout the school year. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that clarifies, because it appears, I'm sorry, and we've had this discussion before, Dr. Alfred Stevens, that my misunderstanding of this amount is a holding amount in case it is needed. This is what Dr. Davis has described. My concern really was perhaps that we didn't do a careful analysis, we didn't do a needs assessment. Why are they all getting the same amount? Aren't these different levels? Don't they require various numbers of students, numbers of needs? And that was my primary concern regarding that. But I believe that the explanation indicates that this is a holding amount and that the largest purchases previously had been up to that amount and that these amounts will not necessarily be expended on those items.
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
All right, thank you. That clarifies.
Dr. Booker?
Dr. Davis, this may be a question for you. I know in the past that we did an assessment on the resources that we were using. And we all know with the learning loss, we know that our students are not where we want them. So do we need to do another assessment on the materials or resources that we're using? Just so we can try to close that gap, because we're at a different time now than we were then, especially with the pandemic, with the COVID. And I'm asking about Achieve 3000. Is it meeting the needs that our students now have? Because I know the needs should be a lot different.
Yes, so we will do we do an annual review of all of our resources. Now, when it comes to our online programming, that is also reviewed annually.
Okay.
For example, the one program that you mentioned, we did review last year, and we have pared down our use of that particular that program. It's no longer used in our middle schools. It's only used in high school now as a tier 3 intervention support.
And Edgenuity is being used as tier 3 intervention?
Edgenuity is being used as our
Recovery?
A credit recovery, thank you. I was losing my
recovery.
words. Our
Okay.
virtual school and our credit recovery
Okay.
services, and grade repair also for geometry.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, tickled by Dr. Booker. So if we go back to the curriculum audit, the recommendation, the strong recommendation there that there be an evaluation of programs. So I just wanted to maybe have a better understanding of where we are with that. I don't recall that we.
Sure, and
Yeah,
I think
I mean, this just related because we're talking about materials, your use of materials, and that plan to have gone back to evaluate the effectiveness and, you know, the efficiency and cost effectiveness, various things like that related to programming in particular.
Yeah, it's perfectly aligned to the question. I think I'm going to defer to Dawn Ayers to answer that.
Good evening, Dr. Garcia. Yes, to your point about program evaluation, we started the process really in depth last year during the budgeting process, and we required that each of our principals, each of our directors filled out a budget tracking form where they listed out each program, how much it was used, was it effective, and was it aligned to strategic priorities. This year, as part of the department planning process, we have taken that to a deeper level where we are meeting with them on a quarterly basis. Sorry, excuse me. We're meeting with them on a quarterly basis, and they're actually going through that budget tracker form each time we meet to make sure that they have embedded evaluation processes within their department so that when we get to the budgeting process, they're able to clearly articulate what they're spending their money on and was it effective. In addition to that, we are collaborating with teaching and learning, and we are doing the same thing with our campuses through the campus improvement planning process so that they're also looking at the things that they're spending their money on so that when we get to the budgeting process, not only are we looking at department, but we are also looking at campuses.
Do you have a sense right now? I know it's not on the specific thing that we're mentioning, but can you give us a good sense for programs that may have been abandoned as a result of that evaluation process? The bigger ones, the broader ones, the ones that we might recognize or that, you know.
So I can speak for teaching and learning. I referenced one earlier, that program Achieve 3000. We did take a deep dive into what was being offered. Not only that the outcomes were limited, but it was not aligned to our vision and framework for literacy instruction. And so there's more than, you know, there's got to be an alignment and a congruence to what we're expecting for instructional purposes, but then also it has to render the results that we expect. That is one example. As we are getting deeper into this process, I'm certain that we could probably provide more examples for you as we get into next year. But I can certainly tell you, though, that every budget ask or request that we have, there's a need for justification of that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, board? We can continue.
Okay, thank you. The final item I have listed for tonight are information only items. Are there any questions regarding the informational items this month?
No questions. Mr. Bates, I don't want to feel like we're ignoring you. You're muted.
I have no problem speaking when I need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bates.
President Shanklin, that concludes my agenda for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we will go on to the future Dr. Adrian Bustillos.
Thank you, Good evening, Board President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, and members of the board. My name is Adrian Bustillos, the Chief Transformation Officer. My board items begin on page 183. And here for you, I have a school choice update of the Office of Transformation. The Choice Schools Festival is set for November 6th from 9 to 1 at the M.O. Campbell Educational Center. This is where all choice school programs will have a booth for families to listen and learn about the current programs they're offering throughout the district. During this time, we'll have students and schools perform during the event to highlight their programs. And parents will also be able to begin the registration process for the school choices for Aldine for the next school year, beginning on November 6th. In addition to that, we will have nights scheduled for each individual campus thereafter. So when they get a wait list of students who come for interest, they'll have an individual campus visit. So families will have this opportunity starting November 6th. And thank you all for joining us at the La Promesa ribbon cutting ceremony that was held on October 5th. You were greeted by student ambassadors. They welcomed you to the school, walked you down the hall, gave you a short visit of this campus, and took you to the event. We were excited to have over 30 guests in attendance, and you were able to hear from speakers from the event, from Dr. Goffney, Board President Shanklin, myself, the principal, Ana Fernanda Flores, and actually 4 students from La Promesa. And there was a great video shown about 2 stories of 2 students and their journeys with their hope for a better education on La Promesa. So it's very powerful. So thank you all for joining us during that time. Next, we have the Young Women's Leadership Academy ribbon cutting ceremony that is set for Friday, November 19th. Right now, we're securing speakers and getting the invitations underway. Right now, currently, the YWLA students are participating in sister circles every Friday morning to build their social emotional toolkits. This work is part of the health and wellness pillar of the Young Women's Preparatory Network. So in addition to that, students also have the opportunity during lunch once a month to participate in STEM speaker series that highlights female scientists. Students also have started a Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Jedi Book Club to explore culture, innovation, in science. And our last thing here of an update for the YWLA is that a new tutorial approach is being utilized to emphasize the importance of students taking ownership of their college career readiness through Socratic seminars. And this is also another pillar of the Young Women's Preparatory Network. And moving on to our next option here is the Young Men's Leadership Academy that will be opening up next fall. We're doing this in partnership with the Texas Education Agency, Good Reason Houston, Prairie View A&M, and the New School Venture Fund to support the new school design of the Aldine's first all-boys school. The school principal has been selected, and tomorrow night you'll be introduced to that individual. The design team has been planning for the past few months with Prairie View A&M and Good Reason Houston to help develop the vision, mission, and value proposition of the school. The school principal has participated in a new school design fellowship through the Texas Education Agency. In addition, the school principal is also actively involved with a cohort of new school leaders nationwide through the New School Venture Fund. So we are set for a media announcement for tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you. Are there any questions? And I want to send to you my prayers and my hopes as you defend. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shanklin. If there's no any questions, then that concludes my items.
Thank you. We'll move on to our Chief of Staff, Ms. Reed.
Mr. Shanklin, board members, my agenda begins, I believe, on page 149 and goes through 154. The item I'd like to draw your attention to is the approval to amend the 2001, 2002 instructional calendars. The information I have presented to you shares that in March, when you adopted the first instructional calendar, it included everything that we thought we needed. It exceeded the number of minutes we needed to be qualified. The next month, you then adopted and approved the 210-day ADSY calendar. And almost 9 months later, as you know, the landscape looks different. And we've learned that both calendars need to be amended to meet the needs of stakeholders. The requested changes do not impact the required instructional minutes or contract requirements for teachers or instructional staff. With the instructional calendar, we've identified a need to convert Friday, November 5th to a staff development workday for teachers and a holiday for students. This would impact all schools except Vines and Irma, which have a different calendar, of course. The other change is on the ADSY instructional calendar. If you remember in September,
out of abundance of caution, we closed in anticipation of Hurricane Nicholas. The ADSY calendar requires that those students have not only 180 instructional days, but they also have the required minutes. And so we'll need to make up that instructional time. So we're asking to amend for Monday, February 21st, 2022, to become a student attendance day rather than a student holiday. And as I mentioned, neither of those changes impact contract requirements for teachers or instructional staff, and there should be no other adjustments.
Board, do we have any questions about the calendars? Ms. Reed.
I do want to make mention that we have begun planning for next year's calendar. We're gathering feedback back from stakeholders and plan to present a calendar for your approval in January of 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no questions, we'll move on to Don Ayers.
Good evening, President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, members of the board. My agenda begins on page 191 with the approval of the district and campus goals and performance objectives. So annually, the Board of Trustees is required to approve the district and campus goals and performance objectives. Please know that these goals and performance objectives have been developed collaboratively between all offices in the campuses and departments, and that they are in alignment with the district strategic priorities. They have been provided for your approval, and I would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Yes,
Dr.
Ms.
Garcia?
Ayers, because it is a very, very lengthy document, I would appreciate perhaps a summary and highlights of some of the elements of those improvement plans. Things that we need to be cautioned about or concerned about, or that we might want to support further as a board. Thank you.
You can provide us with an executive summary. Thank you.
Yes, I can do that.
Are there any other questions of Dr. Ayers? Don?
If not, that concludes my agenda.
Thank you. And I understand that we have a stand-in for Chief, Captain Harris.
Good evening, President Shanklin, Dr. Goffney, and board members. My agenda starts on page 195, and I'm available to answer any questions as needed.
Are there any questions for Captain Harris? Captain, again, we send our prayers to Chief. Hope his ankle gets better.
Thank you. That concludes.
Thank you. Ms. Kate DeWalt.
Good evening, board members. My agenda starts on page 200. It is my normal agenda items for the month, and I'd be very happy if you have any questions, I can answer them for you.
You always are.
I always am.
You said you'd be very happy.
I will be happy if you have any
Impressed.
questions at some point, but I understand if you don't.
Do we have any questions for Kay?
Well, Mr. President, that concludes my agenda.
Okay. Guys, we have executive session items tonight?
Yes, we do.
Okay. We will adjourn into executive session under sections 551071 consultation with attorney, section 551074 personnel matters, section 551072 real estate, section 551076 security personnel or devices, and section 551082 student disciplinary matter, if any, under the Opens Meeting Act. It is now 7:13. And we will adjourn until 7:30. Executive session.